Burger King.
Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. And funny story, you know how I wrecked my ankle a few weeks ago on the way to the shops and was in extreme pain over it? Well, on the way back from the shops tonight, I actually fucked up the other ankle. So, yeah. I'm just having a wonderful ankle month here. Well, I happened to get some YouTube recommendations, and I thought we'd mix things up a bit, because YouTube decided to show me some pro-Israel bullshit. And I figure those jabronis also could use some debunking and roasting, and I've picked out some particularly choice morsels I thought we could look at. So, let me just get started. First one. Let me see, where is it? Where is it exactly? Ah, here we go. There it is. Yes, Israel needs to stop apologizing. This is from some channel called JNS TV. I'd never heard of. YouTube recommended it to me because I think we can all agree if there's one thing that Israel, you just can't help thinking about Israel these days, is they're just too apologetic. They just clearly feel bad about all the things they're doing. It's frankly a little bit awkward for the rest of us that they're constantly apologizing. So apparently that's what these people have decided to go with on JNS TV, and let's just see what the fuck that's about. Get your free Trump flag. I'm sorry, I don't actually. I've got wood for fires. Everything's on the table. That's the sort of thing you just love to hear from pro-Israel propagandists. How's everybody doing, chat? And let me know if I need to adjust the audio at all.
Welcome back to our new episode of The Quad.
Oh, the deputy mayor, the fake deputy mayor of Jerusalem. She literally has no legitimate claim to this title. It's an occupied city. Israel has no right to be making anyone deputy mayor of the fucking thing. But you may remember her because she was on British TV, or it might have been radio, it might have been LBC. I don't remember. But anyway, so the presenter had brought up the way that Israel keeps on attacking the churches in Gaza and murdering large numbers of a small Christian community that happens to be probably one of the oldest Christian communities on the fucking planet. Only 700 people, and somehow they're getting, lately, a very disproportionate share of attacks, it seems. And she said, there are no churches in Gaza. And the presenter actually, pointed out, there are a number of them, including, one of the oldest churches on the fucking planet. And, I mean, very clearly, she spoke too soon, because clearly the goal is for there to be no churches in Gaza. but that hasn't happened yet. So, okay, so that's the kind of people we're going to be hearing from. So, a little bit of content warning. I think we're just going to have, just in case you didn't already get the idea, there's going to be some fucked up shit.
And here I am in Jerusalem with my phenomenal co-host, Vivian Berkovich, former ambassador of Canada to Israel and longtime lawyer, Ashira Solomon, political moderator and commentator. And
What the hell is a
unfortunately,
political
this
moderator?
week, our wonderful Emily Schrader is not with us because she's been going on a whirlwind tour of the United States doing wonderful work for Israel. And
I'm sure I'm sure it's just absolutely lovely work.
Decided maybe to talk about something which has been obvious for a while, or that we've been...
See, the idea, this is clearly what this is meant to be, is some sort of, like, genocidal propaganda version of, like, The View or something like that. That is clearly what they're going for, and Jesus fucking Christ. This is absolutely horrifying. Already just starting out.
Circling and proliferating around, and that is the state of Israeli Asbara. What's working? What's not working?
None of it's working. None of it's working because you're doing genocide, and the problem with that is other genocides you weren't broadcast in real time. So it's easier to lie about these things when you've got a head start, but you don't have a head start, and so your lies just don't work. Plus, you're just not putting any fucking effort into them. I mean, your fake-ass tunnel videos where the cuts were, like, jarringly obvious, and they didn't even bother camouflaging the fact that it was two different cameras, footage from two completely different cameras being spliced together. So, yeah. But I can't wait to hear about where they're supposedly apologizing. I haven't heard that.
Like that word, that name, Asbara. So Asbara,
for anyone who doesn't know what Hasbara means, it literally it's the Israeli term for propaganda, intended for foreign consumption. It literally means explanation. The idea being that what Israel is doing is so right that the only reason anyone could object to it is if they just don't quite understand it, so they need to have it explained to them. That's the idea.
As a word, and this is why it's kind of a little controversial, means in Hebrew to explain, but essentially it's Israel's public diplomacy.
Yeah, propaganda.
The cynics will say propaganda, but I don't like that word.
Oh, there's a shock. She doesn't like to call her propaganda. And I mean, she's a good example of how their propaganda is doing all that well, because she did just go on British television and go like, yeah, there aren't any churches in Gaza actually, and immediately just got completely monstered because she's a monster.
And so you can, spin it many ways, but essentially Hasbara is the Hebrew word for public diplomacy, but it actually literally means explaining. And there's that little thing of, qui s'excuse s'accuse. When you excuse yourself, you're accusing yourself. Why do we have to explain that we exist and we're not going?
Well, because the existence of your regime is a problem. It was based on fucking ethnic cleansing, and it's a racist regime. It shouldn't exist.
Going anywhere.
Have a right to exist.
I have a right to exist.
Oh, fun fact. I mean, this whole... People act like this whole right to exist thing is just some, like, eternal idea that's always been there. It isn't. First of all, international law does not have the concept of a state having a right to exist, because it doesn't even make sense. Because states are going in and out of existence all the time. If states have a right to exist, then, like, the German Democratic Republic had a right to exist. Certainly had a hell of a lot more of a right to exist than Israel does. And the government of the GDR would be entitled to some sort of compensation for their no longer existing and shit. But see, the term came from the 1980s. The PLO was trying to get into talks with Israel at the time. And they had agreed to, recognize Israel in the terms of international law, which is to say that it was, that it existed as a state and was entitled to recognized borders and, peaceful existence and shit. Which is the only right a state actually has under international law. No such thing as a right to exist. And so Israel and the U.S. needed an excuse not to talk to the PLO. And so they said, but the PLO isn't recognizing Israel's right to exist. The idea being that the PLO not only had to recognize that there is an Israel on their territory, but that it was somehow legitimate. To legitimize all the things that were done in order to put an Israel in the middle of Palestine.
This is always what kind of pulls me away from this word. Use it, not use it, but that's really the word that everybody knows. So I want to start with you, Vivian.
I'm surprised they haven't come up with another word, actually. Because it is not a word that actually... I mean, the people who know it know it as a synonym for just telling outrageous lies.
Been an ambassador to Israel, so you are now in a very different position because you are now living in Israel. You're a citizen of Israel, and you've been in Canada. You've been dealing with a lot of things, and you deal with press, etc., every single day. Give me your take on the current...
Well, I mean, she's like collecting the settler colonial box set. A citizen of Canada, now she displaced some Palestinians.
Saint of our Hasbara. What's working, what's not working?
So I just thought it was important that everybody kind of be at the same place in terms of what is Hasbara. And it was 30-ish years ago when this whole kind of concept really became a thing, right? It was like, we have to explain. So,
I mean, it's actually older than that. I mean, Chomsky writes about Hasbara in The Fateful Triangle, and that's from the early 80s.
The first was very positively received.
Well, that's because people, when it was being positively received, that's because there was basically no counterpoint. All you had was pro-Israel propaganda delivered by propaganda outlets that weren't going to contradict it. And you didn't have, the electronic intifada. You didn't have social media. You didn't have, Palestinians live streaming themselves being murdered and shit. And so it was a lot easier. Plus, the thing is that Israel has, to a great extent, lost the Jewish community in the U.S. Like, the younger generations, like, the people who were under 30 around the time of the first big Gaza massacre in 2008, 2009, I mean, overwhelmingly just had disconnected from Israel at that point. Basically people my age. So, they basically, for the first time, actually had to deal with some level of challenge. And much like the Israeli infantry and the Israeli armored units, they don't do well when they're facing challenge. They only do well when there's no challenge. They're very good when they're not actually fighting against anybody. When they're actually challenged, it doesn't work out very well for them. Oh, look at that. It's a map that completely erases Palestine. There's no West Bank here. There's no Gaza. That's the people we're dealing with here.
To sharpen up how Israel was saying, we have to sharpen up how we state our case to the world, so we'll have more understanding, sympathy. Maybe they won't hate us, right?
Yeah.
Maybe
just don't do less genocidal shit. Maybe don't be a racist regime. Maybe don't apartheid so much. I mean, see, because this is the thing. This is the reason their propaganda sucks. I mean, because they're sitting here. The one actually valid explanation for why their propaganda is falling flat is the one they don't want to consider, namely that what they're doing is just utterly unacceptable, and that the problem isn't that they haven't done a good job of explaining what they're doing. The problem is that what they're doing sucks shit.
Before they jump to conclusions, they'll go there and
History.
exactly like they do with every other world problem. And so that began this kind of thing, which is Hasbara. So fast forward to the present. And, you know, Israelis love to criticize themselves. And you also hear, you know, when you're out in Canada or the States or outside of Israel, Jewish communities and others say, Israel sucks, pardon me.
Yeah, see, this is the other. Yeah, they've lost us. They used to be. It was a lot easier to use Jews as rhetorical human shields, as they're wont to do, when Jews were actually buying it. Because for a long time, what Israel could do, you know, since you didn't have a whole lot of easily accessible information about what Israel was actually doing to Palestinians, what Israel was actually doing in the world, you could still make the sort of pitch to, like, Jewish communities that Israel represents your values. Well, you know, sort of, you know, generally decent, you know, liberal, enlightenment-y kind of values and stuff like that, and Jews would buy it. I mean, it was the sort of line that I heard growing up when I was at, like, Hebrew school and shit. Which is, it's like, you know, we're pretty nice, progressive people, and Israel is a country that is run by people like us, so obviously it's going to be a really based country. You know, that sort of reflexive thing. The thing is that only works if you can't immediately, easily pull up evidence of what Israel's actually doing. And so the minute it became easily available, the minute it became so easy to actually find information and actually listen to Palestinians without, you know, the media system filtering them out and everything, the minute you could actually sort of get that stuff without this sort of mediation, it immediately fell apart. And so, yeah, they've lost us to a great extent. You know, these organizations, you have these, they present themselves as Jewish community organizations. What they are is basically ideological police. They ideologically police the Jewish community, and they're not succeeding in it because, you know, a large amount of the Jewish community is paying attention, and they don't like what they see.
Israel really does a bad job of explaining its case.
Yeah.
That's why the UN, the EU, all of these other countries pile.
Yeah, all they need to do is explain why genocide is good, and then people will change their mind about genocide. Like, this is the level of the thinking.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm calling BS. I'm calling hooey. Because I've been watching this for decades now, very carefully, and I don't think it matters what Israel says.
You think so?
I absolutely do.
You take it in the position of the kind of,
I think that it probably does matter in the sense that when you have, like, the Israeli leadership just openly saying, yeah, we want to exterminate the entire population of Gaza. And to this end, we're going to deny them all the basic essentials for life and then carpet bomb them. And that when you say that, when you make an open statement of genocidal intent, it does not actually help your public relations. Because most people in the world think that's a bad thing to do. Like, literally.
Say the more extreme Israelis were like, who cares? They hate us anyway. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying who cares. I care deeply. What I am saying is I think we have to be a little bit fatalistic about it and understand that whether or not it doesn't really matter what we say.
Well, yes, in the sense that when you're doing things that are so far beyond people's idea of what is morally acceptable, you can say whatever the fuck you want. People are just going to think you're horrible, 'cause you are.
How we say it, we're we're trying to penetrate a wall that's impermeable. It's
And
just,
that wall is what?
Unlike Israeli armor, it turns out that turns out to be kind of permeable.
What is that wall?
that wall is a combination today of Islamist anti-Semitism,
Yeah.
kind of converging for the perfect.
Oh yeah, that's the problem right there. Is people would be fine with the genocide if it weren't for anti-Semitism. See, this is an attempt to use Jews as human shields.
Storm with woke anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And
Woke anti-Semitism is just what is their word for just not is for opposing racism, for saying maybe racism isn't a thing we should do so much.
their minds are made up because, as I remember Emily put it so brilliantly when last
Hello,
week,
south of Sublime. How you doing? How's the audio?
binary in their thinking.
Yeah.
You're either in or you're out. You're black or you're white. You're
Wow, I mean, Israel would never be binary. They wouldn't have racial markers on their ID cards where you're either a Jew and therefore entitled to full human rights, or you're not, in which case you're not. They would never. I mean, people need to be less binary, like Israel. Jesus.
oppressed.
And facts don't
or
matter.
oppressor. And
Facts don't matter.
And facts don't matter. But what's interesting now is if the
Facts don't matter. Motherfucker, she was just on British radio lying her ass off about how there are no churches in Gaza. Facts don't matter. Yeah, that's the problem with Israel's critics, is that facts don't matter.
in a way that it makes it look like, oh, those Jews aren't all of these horrible things, that they're going to find a way to make us those horrible things. Okay?
Except the point is that it's not, it's, as she herself just pointed out, they've lost a lot of the Jewish community at this point. My generation of the Jewish community in the U.S. and younger have more or less already sort of cut ourselves off psychologically from this regime, because a lot of us came up starting to hear, at the time when it was first really starting to be somewhat mainstream to say, wait a second, maybe there's some human rights shit going on that we need to be paying attention to. I mean, that was what actually first made me sort of move away from the sort of Zionism I had been steeped in growing up, which was this very kind of watered down, feel good sort of bullshit Zionism, not like the hardcore Likud stuff. But, I remember I was already extremely critical of lots of things. I had grown up studying history independently and realized I was being fed a line of crap on all sorts of different things. Hadn't really questioned anything to do with Israel because I just hadn't come across anything that made me think about it. And I was reading Zed magazine, which I don't know if it's still around. But there was an article, it was something like human rights in Israel, and it's like, wait, so there's a human rights problem in Israel? I had no idea. I was 19, 20 at the time, and I read it, and it's like, holy fuck, yes, there is. It's actually kind of fucked up. And, and my response every time I have, come across something that leads me to doubt some, crap that I'd been handed and sort of accepted reflexively in the absence of anything contradicting it, was to sort of delve in and really get stuck into it and try to understand it. And that process had me, emerge, not in fairly short order, as a straight-up anti-Zionist. But, yeah, so that's the thing. They've lost us. So losing us is actually is really a bad thing for them propaganda-wise, because it turns them from being people who can sort of claim credibly, if not accurately, to represent Jews and our interests and shit, to being people who are appropriating our symbols and claiming to speak for us, leading, millions of us to show up on the streets all over the world saying, fuck no, you're not. We've got nothing to do with these assholes, and we're actually kind of sick of them pretending we do. That's the problem. I mean, it's the problem was that at a time when it actually did seem like Jews and Israel were synonymous, a lot of people would be it would shy away a lot more, I think, from thinking maybe something's fucked up about Israel, because if Jews and Israel are synonymous and something's fucked up about Israel, that must mean that there's something, that's immediately sounds anti-Semitic. But when you've got a whole bunch of Jews saying, yeah, there's something fucked up about Israel, all right, fuck them. And then it doesn't work that way. Then it's like, okay, there's Israel and there are Jews, and those are different things, and a lot of Jews don't like it. And so maybe fuck Israel.
Absolutely.
So, there's a narrative that has pervaded, it, kind of goes and comes and goes, waves and troughs. But I think that civilization generally and society generally prefers to see us as demons.
Yeah.
Well, maybe just a thought. If you don't want Jews to be seen as demons, then let me just propose two little solutions. One is, when you do like horrible, demonic, fucked up shit, don't claim to be speaking in our name. Don't wrap that in the fucking Magen David and the menorah and all this shit. Don't claim to, don't put that shit on us. Don't leave it at our doorstep and say we had anything to do with it. That's the one possibility. Then there's another option. This is an extreme one. Just to be clear, maybe don't do fucked up demonic shit. Like, maybe just don't do that shit. Maybe the reason that people don't like, don't like your shitty ass regime is that it's constantly doing fucked up shit.
And it's not just Israel, it's Jews.
Yeah.
No, it isn't. It is just Israel. Fuck. No. It's nothing to do with us. Most Jews, it's worth noting, don't live in Israel. And the tendency is for Jews to be moving away from Israel. Because the thing is that the climate has been tilting towards, just outright fascism. Even in, like, sort of internal Jewish discourse for a very long time there, to the point where, like, you're, like, even your sort of liberal, progressive sort of people in what is thought of as, like, the sort of lefty, alternative-y sort of places like Tel Aviv are, they can't exist because they get hit by fash. So they're moving away. They're like, fleeing the country to assume, taking on their ancestral nationalities and returning to their ancestral homelands in like Germany or the U.S. or the U.S. or France or wherever the fuck. Meanwhile, and here's another thing that people absolutely have to understand in this context: there are 14 million odd Jews on this planet. Not all of us are Zionists. In fact, the proportion of us who aren't Zionists keeps going up, because the Zionism is one of those things where the more familiar you become with what it looks like in practice, the harder it is to see why you would want to have anything to do with it. So that's about 14 million Jews on the planet. One Zionist organization alone in the US, Kufi, Christians United for Israel, has 80 million members. That's one Zionist organization. Polls indicate in the U.S. that roughly 150 million people in the U.S. are Zionists, which is to say that there are 10 Zionists in the U.S. There are more than 10 Zionists in the U.S. alone for every Jew on the planet. Zionism is not us. And with these people, the reason, the idea is, if they know the minute they're no longer their conspiracy theory where Zionism is somehow a shared Jewish agenda and all that bullshit, the minute that collapses, and it's already falling apart, then they're just another racist shit state.
Scapegoatism in whatever ill of the day it presents itself,
Absolutely.
like Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs would say. Anti-Semitism is a mutating virus. It's a very smart thing. It kind of cloaks itself in the ills of the day.
Yeah, I mean, they're just like moving as far away as possible from actually talking about what Israel is doing because they all understand instinctively. And I would say, and I would point out, like, polling organizations that are pro-Israel seem to be pointing out that this is a problem. Like there was like 20 odd years ago, the right-wing pollster Luntz, the Frank Luntz group, they they did some polling on how to do propaganda for Israel, focus groups, the usual shit, and it got leaked. And what was very interesting reading. I'm sure you can probably find it as a PDF someplace online at this point. One of the interesting things is they like focus grouped various issues to see what the message is, what the messaging had to be, what the propaganda had to be in order to get people on side. And what they found is there were some things that Israel did a lot of, there was no way that you could possibly get people on side, like house demolitions in Sheikh Jarrah and other places in occupied East Jerusalem. For example, they found that there was absolutely no good line on that. The only way to deal with it was simply not to talk about it because it was just too horrible and nobody could find any justification for it. And see, that's what they're doing. They don't want to talk about it. I mean, she here obviously doesn't want to talk about it because she just fucking embarrassed the shit out of herself talking about there's no churches in Gaza, thinking that this wouldn't be contradicted at a time when they were bombing churches in Gaza.
So now we're living in a post-colonial world, so we're the colonialists.
Well, you are the fucking colonialists. And I mean, the wild thing about this is that Israel never used to deny being a colonial regime. Like, if you read the early, thinkers of Zionism, like Herzl and Jabotinsky and them, all of them talked about colonization. Because it's exactly what it is. Everybody knew exactly that that's what it was. And it was not considered, it wasn't a dirty word in sort of European discourse at the time. So there was no reason to avoid it. Then World War II happens. Decolonization happens afterwards because the Europe's colonial empires start falling apart. And all of a sudden, you get to hear colonized people's voices on this subject, and they all say that colonization actually sucks shit. And so then Israel starts pretending that no, they're not colonized, they're not colonial.
And they hated communists, Jews were communists. When they hated capitalists, Jews were capitalists. We're whatever the world needs to hate at that moment. That's what you're saying, that's that wall?
I think that's the wall, absolutely. And
so you're saying that people are just in a weird hating genocide phase, and so they decided, yeah, no, I'm not buying this, actually.
And why that wall exists and all the sociological and theological reasons for it, that's for another day.
Yeah.
Right? But it does exist.
Yeah, I mean, because there's like a literal wall that we could be talking about. What you could, it just occurs to me, if they wanted to illustrate this point about the wall, you could show pictures of the literal wall that is on the West Bank, the apartheid wall that annexes a huge amount of occupied Palestinian territory and makes Palestinians' lives a living hell. I mean, that would be an example of a wall that you could use. Hey, Riveroon, good to see you here.
And you know what? I was in Canada for 4 months. And for those, I'm sure that the
My
majority of
condolences to
our
Canada.
viewers are American. And Canada is that big country up there in the north. But
Most people in the U.S. probably do not realize that Canada is actually a huge country.
it's a country of 40 million, and it's the fourth largest Jewish community in the world. And it's really, really not a great place for Jews these days.
Yeah, I mean... What?
It's much more like Europe. As bad as you guys feel that things are in America,
Yeah.
it's much more like Europe, especially in Toronto. So
Which is, I mean, what's hilarious about this is what she's talking about is, you know, the anti-apartheid protests, the pro-Palestinian protests, which are full of Jews, actually. As she herself pointed out, they've lost Jews.
and
Yes, this is a video. I don't know if you popped in late or not, or if you've been watching all along. But in this video, it's called Israel Needs to Stop Apologizing. Because obviously, I mean, Israel's just so fucking apologetic. And so we have the fake deputy mayor of occupied East Jerusalem, who was recently just completely humiliated on British radio because she was denying that there's such a thing as a church in Gaza. And the presenter was actually aware of the facts and pointed them out. We have this ex-Canadian ambassador who decided, you know, she'd done enough settler colonialism in one hemisphere. She was going to do some settler colonialism in another hemisphere, and now she's over. Yeah, it is conspiracy theory talk. I mean, Zionism, you know, this Zionist ideology is very much conspiracy theory talk. Because what Zionism does a lot of the time is takes anti-Semitic talking points and says, yeah, that's right, but that's a good thing, actually. So, like, anti-Semites will say, yeah, I know, it's a ridiculous title. I mean, how far up your own hole do you have to be to think that the issue right now is that Israel is apologizing too much? But so, like, you know, anti-Semites will be like, yeah, Jews are all part of a common agenda. They all have a political agenda and shit. Which is bullshit, of course. And Zionists are like, yeah, we do. Yeah, we're all part of the Zionist agenda, and or something like that. I mean, that's how Zionism works. It takes anti-Semitic talking points and then turns them around and says, yes, that's true, and it's good, actually. This is, so that is why this sounds like anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, because it is anti-Semitic conspiracy theories.
watch the press very.
And look at that map behind the former Canadian ambassador to Israel, incidentally. Notice something about this map. There is no, there are no boundary lines here. The West Bank, the Gaza Strip, all of it is annexed in this map.
Carefully, I studied, I speak to journalists. You know, it doesn't matter what we say. And same to the government.
Well, maybe the problem is what you do.
They're just looking to trip us up for an excuse, anything to just...
Yeah, I mean, they were just looking to trip you up into doing, you know, genocide, like, just accidentally, as a gaffe.
The minds are made up, you know, and they've been made up for a long time.
Yeah. Okay, but no excuse for us not doing our job properly in terms of being able to present our case to the world. And Ashira, you are kind of the younger generation. You're a generation, what are you, Z, G, D, I can't. I'm a millennial. Oh man, sorry. I'm a millennial. You're a millennial. I don't know what I am. I'm an 80s chick. I was born in the 70s. Okay, so you're a millennial. So
I mean, this is like... They are clearly, this is called the Quad, because there are 3 of them. Yeah, I just know, I was like, I noticed the name of the thing, and then I only just remembered the name of the thing as I'm looking at the fact that there are not 4 of them, actually, so I don't know what the fuck that is. Maybe there was a 4th who left this in disgust. But what they're trying to do is like some sort of ghoulish Zionist The View, essentially. That's what this is supposed to be.
And I think you guys speak even a different language to us.
Yeah.
And then Gen Z is a whole other ballgame with another language, right?
Yes.
And how do you see, like, you as somebody who didn't live here, who came from the outside, came in.
Yep.
You mean sort of like Zionists in general who didn't live there, came from the outside, and just sort of...
Give me your perspective on how you see Israel's image. What are we doing that's right, or what are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, maybe start by talking about that wacky time that Israel decided to sterilize black Jewish women.
Doing that's wrong.
Okay, to Vivian's point, I do believe that the Hasbara is too apologetic. Like when people push on Israel and say, how do you have legitimacy? Well, I can push back on the United States and say, how do you have legitimacy? How do you...
Yeah, I know, it's true, because they're also a fucking racist settler colonial piece of shit regime. Yeah, they don't have legitimacy. And the thing is, like, the majority of the people who are pointing this out they're not going to have any problem leaning into that.
You guys get to the United States, and I feel that
racism, genocide, ethnic cleansing, yeah, exactly, yeah, that's the problem, actually.
Millennials say that's whataboutism.
Yeah,
Shira.
Actually, that term comes from that's a much older term than millennials. That was a term that U.S. propagandists coined for the fact that every time they would try to, in an international forum back when the Soviet Union was around, they would try to position themselves as the as like the human rights supporting imperialist power. The Soviet Union say, but yeah, what about the fucking Jim Crow laws? What about the fact that you like lynch lots of people and stuff? And the U.S. didn't like that because it pointed out that they were completely full of shit. And so they called it whataboutism.
I didn't even know what that word meant until 6 months ago.
Yeah.
No, it's true, but I just feel that sometimes the Hasbara, it's too much explaining yourself, and it's too apologetic. And I would like people to stand firm in who we are. We keep saying, well, look at us.
Yeah, but the thing is, who you are sucks. That's the problem. Yeah, I mean, that is the problem. It is literally not a problem of form. It's a problem of substance. Your substance sucks shit. Yeah, like, seriously, you do better to pretend you were somebody else.
We have diverse population. Look at
We have a right to exist.
Yeah, such a wonderful diverse population that, except that they literally in the media discuss how that diversity is a threat and how they need to do something to stop the birth rate of the diverse parts of the population.
The right to
We have a right
exist pushes me over the edge.
Yes, no, just stand. This is our country. This is where we live. We're not moving. Deal with it. Like,
Except that you are moving. I mean, like, literally, like, all the, like, let's just say, like, all the better sections of the Israeli Jewish population are appalled enough and actually kind of terrified by the rest of y'all, and so they're fucking off. You want to talk to, like, progressive or leftist Israeli Jews, you go to Berlin, you go to London, you go to New York, you go to all sorts of places, because in Israel they're getting arrested.
like stop, sugarcoating for the international community.
This is sugarcoating? This is fucking sugarcoating?
Secondhand, Israel is not tapping into its human capital. It has a rich, rich resource of human capital, which is women and Jews of color.
You mean the ones that you sterilized? The ones that you stole babies from? The ones that you actually... I mean, like, that's... Like, Avi Shleim, an Iraqi-Israeli historian, he wrote a memoir recently, it came out, and one of the things in it is where he talks about the evidence that Israel was involved in contriving the attacks on the Jewish community there, one of the oldest Jewish communities in the world, in order to get them to leave, because Israel needed Arab Jews in order to make up the numbers. And when Arab Jews got there, they got treated like shit.
Know that women leaders excel in diplomacy, national security, because we are gifted with being able to compromise. We're gifted with being able to create and maintain relationships.
It's the dystopian
and they need to use
view.
more women voices at the front. They also need to use their Jews of color. Listen, I'm not into or
Yeah, wait.
fan of identity politics.
You do realize that the only reason these racist motherfuckers even they literally put her on there because they're trying to respond to how fucking racist the society is.
But seeing that everyone from the outside thinks Israel is this white European country in the Middle East just dominating, they need to see the diversity. And I think that that doesn't mean you just put up any face. There are faces who are Sephardic and Jews of color who are educated, who are articulated, and who are women who can do the job.
Well, this was the whole idea, by the way, of this show.
Yeah, it's obviously. Yeah, I mean, and Israel is doing a wonderful thing, is doing a wonderful job of showing this ability to compromise. Like, I mean, that's just such a... I mean, Israel is just always compromising.
That I always felt, and I really thank Jane.
You know, like, I mean, there's this big dispute. Do we bomb the people of Gaza to death? Do we starve the people to Gaza to death? And they, you know, this is a really big dispute that they're having, and so they worked it out. They said, we'll do both. We'll bring both, we'll reach across the aisle, and we'll starve the ones who aren't killed by the bombing.
Yes, for that, for giving us this platform. I always felt that Israel has incredible women, but somehow those voices
you mean
are not
women who aren't credible?
out.
I mean, she's a good example. She is an incredible woman. Like, she is a woman who is not credible.
Of Israel.
Yeah.
And even though I've been in politics now for 9-10 years, it's really rough for politics, for women in politics here. And unfortunately, the numbers are going in the wrong direction.
Well, yes, because it's a bunch of fucking fascist, misogynist pricks. I mean, the society is already misogynist as hell. Like, there is no civil marriage. Women need their husband's... remember how Steven Crowder was getting all pissed off on his show because women can just divorce you when they're sick of you? Well, in Israel, women can't divorce you when they're sick of you. You have to give them permission. And some motherfuckers will deny that permission for years and years and years.
Exactly. The numbers are going in the wrong direction. We went, in local politics, we went from 13% to 19, 18%. Wow.
Yeah.
But in national politics, we went from almost 30% back down to 25%. You guys know that I'm very involved with...
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like maybe, again, the fascism might not be good. Maybe you shouldn't be doing propaganda for a regime that is very clearly not comfortable having you even in front of a camera.
With the moderate Arab countries, Abraham Accords, 40% of the ministers in the UAE are women. Saudi Arabia's ambassador to Washington is a woman.
Wow.
They have a strategy in place for exactly what you're talking about. And Israel somehow doesn't see it, and we're going backwards. And this is why...
So what you're saying, I mean, once again...
Because we are those voices. I also wanted this to be a diverse panel with people from different backgrounds. And this is really what we're trying to do.
Which is why there's one black woman.
I think you're completely on point. And there's nothing I hate more when I...
Yeah, I mean, this is their version of diversity, because just find someone who is just a token, and who isn't going to bring up the horrific shit that Israel has done to Jews of color. Hell, black Jews in Israel, the ones who were allowed to be in the country at all, it's worth noting, had huge protests a few years ago because of how badly they're treated there. Huge protests. So, I mean, finding somebody who's going to go on there and actually give the line that, oh, everything's fucking hunky-dory in Israel, and the problem is we're just too apologetic about, the genocide, is wild.
I see a panel in different places with no women or one token woman.
Yeah.
I can't take it. And
Yeah, or say one token woman of color.
older I get, and I hate to say this, the older I get, the more I see the world through gender lenses. And I wish I didn't.
Yeah,
Me too.
me
Wish
too.
I did. I could put the blinders back on.
No, I'm not fighting it anymore because it's just there. It is what it is, and we got to deal with it and fight it head on. I want to add something because first, I totally agree. The picture that came out when this new government was sworn in almost a year
You mean of the fascists?
ago.
Yeah.
A picture, all men, all older men,
Yeah.
all older white men,
Yeah.
half of them with long beards.
Yeah.
Who I looked at that, it's like, you do not represent this country.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe don't do propaganda for them? Like, literally, just, you don't have to be doing, I mean, I guess there's money in it. Clearly, it is a much better economic decision to do propaganda for Israel than to do propaganda in support of just, like, basic human decency and Palestinian rights. That's very clear. That is a much better commercial decision, but, I mean, if the fucking regime doesn't represent you and you're actually kind of worried about the direction it's going, maybe don't do propaganda for it?
In any way. It made my blood boil. And then furthermore...
And here you are talking about how this regime needs to stop apologizing as if that were a thing they were doing. Like, you don't have to be doing that. Like, I don't see a gun to your head.
Do we even have, on the point of Hasbara, even in this government, do we even have a government spokesman?
No. So that's what I wanted.
Well, I mean, there have been all the various, like, Israeli military spokespeople who have utterly humiliated themselves by telling easily refuted lies, like that time they tried to claim that the fucking days of the week was a list of Hamas members.
To talk about, and my own experience with this whole thing, is that on October 7th, once I came out of the shelter, and I'm observant, I'm Shabbat observant, so normally I wouldn't be on my phone, but I realized something really bad was happening. I open up my phone, and my phone has been blown up by BBC Sky Channel 4, and I thought, why are they calling?
This is, and it's worth noting, a big part of the reason that that's the case is quite simply that Israel has military censorship. They do not have even the pretense of freedom of the press. So, a lot of the time, but on the other hand, they do not actually censor foreign media, though this government currently is trying to change that and make it a crime to consume media that harms the national morale. Like, Palestinian citizens of Israel have already been arrested for this. But yeah, the thing is, like, Israelis are constantly finding out about shit going on there, going on, 5 minutes drive from them, from foreign press, because everything that is published in Israel has to go through the military censor, and the military censor doesn't necessarily want to admit it.
Calling me. Now, yes, I have...
I mean, there was a case, I feel like it was an espionage case. This is like maybe 10, 15 years ago. I forget the names of anyone involved, it doesn't matter. But the thing was, everybody knew the name of the defendant in the case, because she'd been all over the foreign press. She'd been all over The Guardian, and The Times, and The Post, and The Telegraph, and all the rest of it. And everybody reads them, so, everybody knew this person's name. Everybody knew exactly who she was, but you still were not allowed to write her name in print, and you weren't allowed to mention her name on television. Even though everybody already knew it. Like it was some kind of fucking secret.
Been deputy mayor for foreign affairs of Jerusalem for 5 years. I've been a city councillor for 8 years. And essentially, when something bad happens in Jerusalem, they call me because that's been my role.
You mean being something bad that happens in Jerusalem?
But if they're calling me on October 7th, it's because they called the Prime Minister's spokes, and the Prime Minister on October 7th did not have an international spokesperson.
Wow.
The army was too probably in the mess of what was going on, the tragedy,
I mean, one of the things that has really come out of subsequently, like, Israeli journalism investigating all of this stuff is that the Israeli military were absolutely up their own asses. It was complete chaos. Nobody was at the helm. Nobody was giving orders. It was just everyone for themselves, and the whole thing was just a huge mess. It's just complete and utter chaos. All it took was like one prison break, and the whole fucking the wheels fell off.
That the tragedy that was ongoing on October 7th.
Yeah, they hate
to
tokens.
Deal with anything. They didn't speak. Most people didn't speak for 4 days.
I know.
And I spoke from 10 a.m. on that Saturday morning, and they haven't been able to shut me up since. But
that's a pity. I mean, it probably would have been better for them if they had.
Thank God.
But the point is that I think that even though, Vivian, you're right, we have to stand strong, or we shouldn't have to be explaining ourselves. There's no excuse for not having a government function, which is also a central command. There's a lot of wonderful Hasbara voices in this country.
Yeah, there's no real sign of them. I mean, the fucking propaganda that these people have been putting out has been just absolute bargain basement quality. Like, I mean, remember the Al-Ahli hospital when they first admitted to blowing that up, and then it turned out over 500 people had been killed, so they decided maybe we don't want to take credit for that one. We'll save that for later. And so they released this audio that was supposedly some Hamas soldiers, admitting that they did it. And here's the thing. I don't know, chat, how many of you work in audio editing at all. This is pretty basic audio editing shit. Like, it's basic enough I know this. When somebody took the recording that they had uploaded, that the Israeli propaganda account on Twitter that posted it had uploaded, and ran it through just a normal audio editing workbench program like Audacity or something like that, it had 2 audio tracks. Two audio tracks means that it's a composite. If you have a recording, you will have one audio source. There's one mic that is getting everything. It is flowing into one audio in. So you have one track. The only reason you have 2 tracks is if you are taking 2 separate recordings and compositing them together in order to create a fake conversation. And there were other things that had been edited as well, like they did a bunch of sound effects adjustments and shit like that. And here's the thing. This I'm saying as somebody who is at a very low level as a sound editor. I can do some stuff kind of well, but I'm no expert. It is easy as fuck to avoid getting that wrong. If you're going to do a fake and you don't want people to immediately notice it has 2 audio tracks, you export it as an MP3. You export it as a fucking MP3 and it will merge the tracks. That's all you fucking have to do. It takes 10 seconds, tops. That's if your computer is slow. Like, I mean, the wonderful Hasbara voices that came up with that bullshit. Or the fucking Mexican actress who they decided, they posted a video of, and she was pretending that she was a nurse at Al-Shifa hospital. And nobody had heard of her, and she did not have an accent that made any sense, and within a day and a half, she'd been conclusively identified as a fucking telenovela actress. And the only response to the fucking Israeli propagandists on Twitter was to just delete the video. Just pretend it didn't happen. I mean, yeah, just wonderful propaganda they've got. Yeah, I mean, and clearly the problem is that they're apologizing so much.
And we are fighting a public diplomacy war without central command.
Exactly.
Without, I get messaging every day.
Tone from the top.
Tone from the top. What are we?
Yeah, but the thing is, look at the tone from the top isn't going to help you. Because every time Netanyahu opens his mouth, it is just to openly say, yeah, we're going to do genocide. I mean, people have been acting, there's like some clip that he, in the past couple of days, that people like, he accidentally admitted that he's doing genocide. And it's like, what do you mean accidentally? He's been saying the same thing since October 7th. He's been saying that he intends to exterminate the civilian population of Gaza since October 7th. This is not some fucking revelation. Like, that's the tone that's being set from the top. And the problem is there is absolutely no way to pretty that up. I mean, that's why, like, the closest they've come is just murdering journos. That's all they've got. Because somebody recognizes that the real problem is that you can compare their words with the real-time video, and their words just don't really ring all that true when you compare it with, like, actually seeing what happened. Yeah, exactly. Their propaganda is bad, and they should feel bad.
If we could, it's like fighting a war when everybody's shooting in a different direction.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. And everybody's now an Asmara expert. Everybody now can be interviewed.
Yeah.
And some people...
Yeah, I mean, this is rich coming from her. Like, you know, Israel was just bombing the shit out of the Christian community in Gaza, and she goes on to an LBC interview and says there are no churches in Gaza. It's like, I mean... Even counting, even like writing off the ones that they wrecked, including one of the third oldest church on the fucking planet. There are still churches in Gaza. Actually, the Christian community, despite being quite small, is integral. Like the gym everybody went to back before it got like blown up, was the YMCA. Like. But you know, you can interview anyone, as she just said.
really embarrass us.
Yeah.
And some extreme
Yeah, like you did. You really embarrassed him.
voices that, of course, the press is just waiting for these morons to trip up. And so we
No
need
comment.
to take this seriously. And I want to actually give a shout out to the tech community. And I know that
Okay, hang on a second. I have to find this. I have to find this since she just talking about all these jabronis who don't know how to do propaganda well and get embarrassed. Here we go.
If a ceasefire means the return of the hostages and the dismantlement of a genocidal regime that has stated that they're going to attack us again, then everybody would be in favor of a ceasefire. But if a ceasefire means that we're just going to keep them quiet for a bit until they attack again, then it's Israel's obligation to defend its citizens and destroy that threat, don't you think?
Why is it necessary, it is reported, to start shooting, having snipers outside a church?
I saw the reports this morning. The church, there are no churches in Gaza, so I'm not quite sure where the report is talking
There's
about.
a Catholic church in there, isn't there, that is...
Yeah, unfortunately, there are no Christians because they were
There are 700 Christians. Yeah, Israel is currently trying to reduce that number by about 700.
driven out by
Well,
Hamas.
respectfully, there are Christians, because I spoke to an MP yesterday who has family members in the church who are Christians.
Well, I don't know
Unless you're
what
telling me
happened.
she's
I
wrong.
Yeah,
don't,
you see, this is... It's true. Just any fucking jabroni can get interviewed on behalf of Israel, and they just can make a complete ass of themselves.
know who was attacked. I didn't see the report. If a sea
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she has a point. Like, maybe... Yeah, they think They literally think, I mean, the term haspara literally means explanation, because they think the problem is that, you know, people just don't understand why what they're doing is so. Oh, that's a great freeze frame on her. Look at her. It's like her eyes about to pop out. Yeah, exactly. Joe Biden, I mean, the organ grinder, he's the message from the top. He's like the setting the tone from the top. And that motherfucker, it has on various occasions looked like he just didn't have anything. I mean, it was really cute when he claimed to have seen the photos that didn't exist of the beheaded babies that also didn't exist, and then his own people in the White House had to scramble to say, yeah, actually, those photos, there's no proof that there are any such photos. He didn't know what he was saying.
Vivian, you share my admiration for the tech community in many ways during this terrible conflict that we're in. But the tech community have gotten together and said, well, yes, we're outnumbered in terms of the public diplomacy voices on social media.
Right.
But we have ingenuity, we have creativity. Why don't we use our, startup nation salts and actually use our, startup nation salts?
Startup Nation sauce? What the hell is Startup Nation sauce? I mean, it's probably like za'atar or something like that they nicked off the Palestinians.
And actually create some real solutions to real challenges. And I'm very proud to say that a couple of weeks ago,
how do we sell genocide?
Hasbara hackathon.
Oh.
With the Minister of Foreign.
Yeah, because if there's one group of people who are just great at not making complete asses of themselves when they talk in the public, and are great at just winning over the general public when they talk, it's tech bros. Tech bros, I mean, they never put a foot wrong. Those are definitely the people to go with.
Affairs at JVP right here in Jerusalem.
Amazing.
And they worked for 48 hours. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs gave them the challenges. Many of them are being outnumbered, etc. And this is a little snippet of the incredible hackathon, Hasbarathon as we called it, that we had.
They, literally are so fucking oblivious that they don't realize that this term... See, the only reason that this term was ever a useful thing was that people outside of Israel didn't know what it meant. Now it is, and now everybody knows what it means, and it is synonymous with racists lying in order to justify the indefensible. And she's still, calling something a hasparathon, you might as well just call it a bullshit-a-thon.
Here in Jerusalem a couple of weeks ago.
Which is what it is. Here, yeah, okay. David Saranga. I've never heard of this guy, but apparently he's one of the people trying to figure out a way to sort of spin explicit genocidal intent. הגבירים את הקול הישראלי בעצמאות טכנולוגיה. Yeah, amplifying the Israeli voice through Hasbara tech. Do they not realize that, the fucking game is up? They need, if they're gonna just, they need to find another word, because everybody knows that this is just a word for lying.
אנחנו במלחמת מילים.
Oh, wow. So this is just a way for her to flex what she's doing.
ואנחנו, יש לנו תוכן טוב, אל תתבלבלו.
Yeah, wonderful content, like the fake nurse in Shifa, or the fake videos, or that great video of of Rear Admiral Hagari pointing at a calendar with the days of the week written on it and going, yeah, this is a list of terrorists, and thinking that people couldn't see what it was. Yeah, I mean, wonderful content. I have to say, like, this is the most low effort bullshit I've seen from. I've been following and debunking Zionist propaganda since like 2007, 2008, like actually writing fairly extensively, not regularly but extensively, analyzing this stuff, tracking down sources, pointing out where the lie is and stuff. I have to say this is some of the most low effort bullshit I've seen.
הבעיה שלנו זה לא התוכן. הבעיה שלנו זה כמו שאת תיארת, את
Your problem isn't reach. You got tons of reach. Because whatever the fuck Israel claims, the US media and most of the Western media will put that out uncritically. You got tons of reach. Not only that, you've got social media platforms who will censor people who are just putting out the, what the other side is saying. I mean, reach is not their problem. Content is, and content isn't really their problem. Yeah, their content sucks shit. It is just, like, embarrassingly bad. But the problem is that you're selling something nobody is buying. You're trying to sell people something that just is inherently unsaleable.
שאנחנו מעט אנשים, לכן זה מובן מאליו שאנחנו הולכים להפסיד את הקרב המילים. זה לא צריך להיות ככה, כי אנחנו אנשים של טכנולוגיה, אנחנו אנשים של יצירתיות, ואנחנו אנשים שמכלום אנחנו עושים הרבה.
So yes.
Well, yeah,
so
nothing.
saw...
Nothing is what is, I guess, their word for like shit they stole off of Palestinians. Like, I mean, with some of the great content. Another example is like one of the things that is like a regular feature now on Israeli social media is soldiers and family members of soldiers returning from Gaza, boasting about the shit they stole from Palestinians' homes. Like, a soldier's girlfriend puts up a photo of all this unopened, expensive cosmetics that her boyfriend stole from some woman in Gaza who probably hasn't had a fucking shower in a month and a half. And he's just... And unopened cosmetics, that shit's expensive. Stole this shit, and is bragging about it. And then in the comments, another woman says, you should really take that down, not because I give a shit about that woman, may she never see the light of day again, but you could get your boy into trouble. And it's like, and give us a bad name, and it's like, you deserve a bad name. And the only and the worst thing about it is that they've, like, appropriated all of our fucking symbols, so that, they're wiping their shit off on us constantly, as they're doing in this fucking horrible The View clone here.
The wonderful work that was done, and I've been speaking to tech leaders. Many people have really incredible solutions. We're using now our kind of tech salts.
What's with the fucking Star Wars font here?
To deal with this non-tech problem, but with definitely with tech issues involved. And I think that Hasbara here and what we portray
Holy
out...
shit, I've been talking about this thing for over an hour and 13 minutes now. We're 15 minutes deep into it.
Is very different, right, to what's going on in the diaspora. And I know, Vivian, you're very involved with that because you were there for the first 2 months of the war. What's going on in terms of how the Jewish community...
Oh, this should be interesting. Is she going to acknowledge that actually the Jewish community hates this? That the, like... especially, like, anyone, like, in their 40s or younger already feels completely alienated from this regime and is a little bit resentful of the fact that we're constantly associated with it. I mean, I remember in, like, 2009, it was, like, the under 30s, we have a survey of, like, Jewish under 30s in the U.S., and it said, like, would you consider it a personal tragedy? Would you consider the destruction of Israel, this emotive language, a personal tragedy? It was like 81% said no. No, not a personal tragedy. That is how alienated much of the Jewish community is from Israel.
are managing this on a Hasbara front?
I'm going to be pretty blunt. I know it's very out of character. Yeah, I know. Really out of character.
So shocking.
But, we're kind of, as I don't like to say, but I do say often, we're, as a community, we're in the Warsaw Ghetto, and we need Molotov cocktails.
Yeah, but you're in the Warsaw Ghetto, you got that bit right. But you don't need Molotov cocktails. You're working with Jürgen Stroop, and so you've got tanks and shit. It's the other side who have to resort to fucking Molotov cocktails. See, this is like the fucking warped historical consciousness that Zionism has wrought in the Jewish community is just a thing to behold. It just reminds me of yeah. How can she talk about the Warsaw Ghetto in the midst of all this shit and not realize that this is not the way that that's gonna play? It just reminds me of Bernadette McCalliskey, or that Devlin as she then was, on her visit to Boston. She was asked about, the Irish American community, since she's a big, a socialist Republican who was very big in the struggle, still is very big in the struggle in Ireland. And she'd said that she was really disappointed in the Irish American community because they, knowing their history, knowing what they came from and why they had to flee Ireland, and flee all this oppression in Ireland and everything, they came over to the U.S. and have allowed themselves to be used to oppress black people in the U.S., and they talk about them the way orange men talk about, the Irish community in the 6 counties. And, I mean, I think about that a lot. Every time I hear things like that, because it's like, it's not that long ago that we were facing fucking armored columns coming in with genocidal intent to exterminate a population of a walled ghetto that we were stuck in. And how the fuck can you look at this and, identify with the people on the tanks? What the fuck kind of historical consciousness do you have? How fucking warped are you? That's your takeaway, that you're literally identifying with the SS. But somehow convincing yourself that that's not what you're identifying with. That's fucked up.
This is war. It's not a cocktail party. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my encounters during those 2 months with organized community groups,
which is to say Zionist groups that are trying to ideologically police the Jewish community,
they were still at the cocktail party.
What do you mean?
I mean, okay, you're raising money. That's great. But not really focusing and addressing on the gravity of the situation. We went from 0 to 100 in one day.
Mm.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah.
For example, you have, and this is a huge issue in Toronto, where there are 250,000 Jews, okay? Big population just in the Greater Toronto area. And I know this is being replayed throughout the States.
One poll in the States shows Jews are actually more likely than the general population, very slightly more likely, but still more likely, to describe what the U.S. and Israel are doing in Gaza as a genocide.
School boards are simply allowing anti-Semitic bullying and propaganda to flourish in the classroom.
Example, please.
Oh, by who?
Yeah. Example, please.
Teachers and students.
Right.
Yeah. What? Give an example of what the anti-Semitic propaganda is.
And Jewish kids are literally being beaten up, threatened verbally, and parents who go to school boards are basically being dusted off.
Literally, people are losing their jobs for supporting Palestinian rights. Teachers are losing their jobs for supporting Palestinian rights. Palestinians in the U.S., a fucking 6-year-old Palestinian kid was stabbed at the incitement of, people like this and Joe Biden, who were all talking about how that's kind of what needs to happen to Palestinians and shit. You know, 3 Palestinian guys, Palestinian American guys in Vermont got shot by some Nazi fuck, because they were wearing keffiyehs. You know, so I feel like maybe there's something missing from this version of history. Yeah.
And I'm very involved with a group of parents still, which is a growing group in Toronto. And it's just, this is decades of kind of a buildup of this diversity, what is it? Diversity, equity, inclusion.
Which is just, I mean, this is where you can see this, well, where the intersection is between white supremacists and Zionists. Because white supremacists are freaked out about that too. I mean, all DEI is companies don't want to get sued for discrimination. And so it helps for them to be able to point to this department, even if it doesn't do anything, to say, oh, we're not doing any racism or anything. We have a DEI department. They are the least busy department in our entire company. But, I mean, it freaks out professional racists like these.
The DEI kind of, you know, sacraments. And
Sacraments.
they're just not moving. They're just not responding. And so you think
the communities
the organized community is not responding. The organized community, such as it is, you know who you are, I don't have to name you, because you have the same name all over North America.
You mean shit? Like, I mean, when she's talking about the organized community, she's not talking about, like, community organizations again. These are pro-Israel organizations that claim to represent us and are actually using us as a human shield. And, yeah, the reason that they're probably not doing very well, and I would agree they're not doing very well, is because it is much harder to make the argument that it is anti-Semitic to oppose genocide in Palestine when every fucking demonstration against the genocide in Palestine is full of Jews being against it. You know, like, literally they cannot make this argument as easily anymore because so much of the community is not with them. These organizations, I mean, it's fucked up. Because, like, I mean, like, NPR, the local NPR affiliate, one of the two, WVXU, had this thing early on in October about, you know, how are the communities, and it was the Jewish and the Muslim community, never mind, you know, Palestinian Christians or anything like that, never mind specifically Palestinian community, how they're squaring up to it. And the only representative they had of the Jewish community was a guy from the fucking AJC, the American Jewish Congress, or Committee, which is a far-right group. They're racist as fuck. They're just a pro-Israel front group, and they work with the far right. They're pieces of shit, and they do not represent us. They're not, you know, accountable to us in any way. But in the U.S., you know, they're accepted as our representatives because they represent, you know, U.S. foreign policy.
I can tell you that many of the large organized communities simply are not they're not exercising leadership.
She almost said executing, which is kind of a word you'd want to avoid in this context.
They're not saying, okay, parents, we know what's going on out there. We're going to lead. We're going to be the figurehead in this response.
Yeah, because that doesn't work anymore. That bullshit doesn't work anymore because the Jewish community is not actually, you know, being cowed by these pricks anymore so much.
To rampant institutional anti-Semitism.
Like, there is institutional anti-Semitism. It is overwhelmingly, and I would go so far as to say actually exclusively, pro-Israel anti-Semitism. But you'll never hear these motherfuckers talking about pro-Israel anti-Semitism because it gives the game away.
It is affecting your children.
Are they in denial, Vivian? Or are they just still at the cocktail party, as you said?
I think that many of them are still at the cocktail party. I also think that, and the culture in
this
the
is
States
making
and
me
Canada
want to have a brandy and soda, but I don't have soda.
Very different. Canada is much more like Europe, much more like, you know, ghetto mentality, deferential.
Ghetto mentality isn't deferential, though. Yeah, I mean, the ghetto mentality, as she pointed out, is chucking petrol bombs at tanks.
But I do think that there is a lack of sophistication with respect to understanding power, how power works, and a real reluctance to get in people's faces. And
Yeah, I mean, these fucking Zionist organizations, they'll never get in anyone's faces. They're so polite. Like, what the fuck planet are these motherfuckers on?
to be aggressive, as Ashira was saying, not so much aggressive as assertive, confident, assertive. I'm not apologizing to you. I'm not apologizing to anyone.
Yeah.
And that's like, I went in and you know what? I said to
Nobody,
somebody
like,
there, I
who
said,
the fuck's apologizing? What planet are these people on? But I'm noticing the time, and it is time to wrap up. I think we might continue with this, because this is interesting. It is interesting to watch them acknowledging that actually their propaganda has been an absolute fiasco, while trying to avoid the turd in the punch bowl that is the fact that there's certain things you can only sell if people don't get to see what they are. So let me just thank everyone for joining. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I hope you found it interesting. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. If you enjoy the stream, please consider supporting for the stream by supporting my Patreon or by leaving a tip. Let me just drop that tip command in there. And I guess I will see you tomorrow. Yeah, I've never seen this before. Like everything else practically that I look at it on stream, I'm watching it for the first time here. I've never, the only person on here I've heard of is this Fleur Nahum, who the church, the one who says there's no churches in Gaza. But yeah. So, I mean, so this is interesting because they are quite rightly a little bit worried about how bad their propaganda is, but they don't want to acknowledge why. Oh, well, I mean, this is a long thing. I'm only 15 minutes deep into it. I wonder if they will ever get around to admitting that maybe the reason is that the thing they're trying to sell is unsaleable. Have a